Alright, so let's create the Lambda function that will link Amazon skills to AWS IoT. Let's go back to the AWS console and select Lambda from the service list. Here you can see a list of all your active Lambda functions. Lambda functions are a way of running functions in a virtual runtime environment without having to provision a full virtual machine. Let's create a new one by selecting Create a Lambda function. As you can see, there are a lot of blueprints for various function types. There are blueprints for database interactions, Amazon Kinesis, and so on. Let's just use a blank function template. Let's select Alexa Skills Kit as the trigger. As the name implies, this is the service that will trigger the function to run. If the only module we were using for our code was the AWS SDK, we could edit all of our code inline here. However, the code that we will be using also has the Alexa SDK as well as the AWS SDK. In order to run our code then, we will have to package the JavaScript file as well as any modules that we require into a zip and upload it to Lambda. You can get the full code from GitHub, but let's take a look at the fundamental parts of our code. So here's the code that we're going to be using for our Lambda function. The first thing we do is set up a connection to our AWS IoT device by specifying the endpoint. We can find the endpoint in the AWS IoT device dashboard under the Interact tab here. We also want to specify the region, US East 1. You might be wondering about the certification for the connection, like we needed to set up on the gateway. Since this will be running internally on Amazon Lambda, we will set up the certification between AWS IoT and this Lambda function using a policy tool a little bit later on. The next thing I want to look at in our code is the Alexa handler function, which will interface with the Alexa Skills Kit, and we'll see this in the next step. What's important to note is the name of the handler here. In this case, it's called handlers, and it refers to the handlers function defined here. This handlers function is the translation between Alexa Skills and AWS IoT. Here we can see a list of device state intent that Alexa Skills Kit will send to Lambda with the corresponding slots. Now keep in mind that I named these the same as in the Alexa Skills just to be able to keep everything clear. They can be called whatever you want inside the Lambda function. In essence, what we have here is a switch function with the various slots as the switches. Here we can see the case for all on. When this Lambda function gets an all on from the item slot, it will set the blue and red LED states to 1 or on. In order for this Lambda function to actually send the LED states to AWS IoT, we are using the update device shadow method. We specify the thing name as well as the payload. And in our case, that payload is the device state. Make sure that you change the thing name to your specific thing that you created in AWS IoT. Once you have added your specific connection details, zip up index.js as well as the node modules folder that came with the original code. Go back to Amazon Lambda and upload the package. Leave this handler as a default index.handler. Create a new role from a template. Now, this role is the one that's going to authenticate our Lambda function and AWS IoT. We will give it a role name of lambda_AWS, so we'll be able to identify it later. And we will use the simple microservice permissions as a template. Once the function is created, it will be assigned an ARN. Let's copy this to the clipboard so we can paste it into our custom skill. Before we do that, however, let's take a look at that policy role that we created and assigned to our Lambda function. If we navigate to the IAM service, and then click on Roles, we can see a list of all of the roles that we've created. Here is that Lambda underscore AWS role that we created and then attached to our Lambda function. Here we can see all of the policies which are attached to this role. We want to attach one more. Specifically, we want to attach AWS IoT Full Access. This policy will allow the Lambda function to send and receive data from AWS IoT.